Imagine, for just a second, surviving a plane crash. Picture pulling yourself from the smoking wreckage, staggering through a tree line, and just collapsing onto the sun-drenched sand of a stunningly beautiful, completely deserted island.
Wow, yeah, that is an intense mental image to start with.
Right. But you look around as the initial shock wears off, and reality hits you with this massive wave of adrenaline. There are no adults anywhere.
None. Zero rules.
Exactly, zero rules. There is absolutely no authority figure to mete out consequences for anything you do. On paper, at least to a certain mindset, that sounds like the absolute pinnacle of human freedom.
Oh, absolutely. It sounds like the ultimate summer camp.
Yeah, like an unsupervised summer camp where the kids are abruptly handed the keys to the kingdom. And that brings us to today's topic. Today, we are diving into a stack of critical analysis, essays, and reviews covering the highly controversial 2026 television adaptation of Lord of the Flies.
And it really has been a controversial one, to say the least.
Oh, massively. Our mission for this deep dive is to extract exactly what this dark psychological experiment reveals about the incredibly fragile guardrails keeping our own modern civilization intact.
Right, because this adaptation really hones in on those guardrails.
It does, but the framing question we have to keep coming back to as we unpack these sources is this. How quickly does that intoxicating, pure joy of total freedom inevitably sours into something terrifying when it becomes clear the grown-ups are never coming back?
I mean, taking that scenario a step further, the consensus across all these analyses makes it really clear that we need to discard the idea of this being a standard survival thriller.
Yeah, we aren't looking at a story focused on the logistics of finding fresh water or, like, building adequate lean-tos to survive the monsoon season.
Exactly. The show functions as a high-pressure sociological crucible. It's really an exploration of what happens to the human psyche and human sociology when the external structures we rely on to dictate our behavior are completely vaporized.
Vaporized is a great word for it, because that initial euphoria of complete liberation, it has a remarkably short half-life, right?
Oh, incredibly short.
Yeah, once the sugar rush of, no bedtimes and no parents were
A creeping existential panic sets in.
right. And the immediate human reflex to that kind of panic isn't to hold hands and sing songs, it's to build a hierarchy.
People need structure.
They really do. The survivors instantly fracture, crystallizing around two central figures who represent very different philosophies. I've got Ralph and Jack.
Right, and the reviewers point out that those two characters function as the primary avatars for a much deeper historical conflict.
Oh, for sure. Ralph really represents the traditional social contract.
He does. He is the embodiment of rational legal authority. His platform is based entirely on delayed gratification.
Right, like we have to suffer a bit now to be okay later.
Exactly. He argues that the group must build shelters, maintain a signal fire, establish a democratic order with that famous conch
The
shell.
conch, yeah, classic.
Right, and he wants them to endure temporary discomfort now with the expectation of being rescued later. He's essentially asking the group to voluntarily limit their newfound absolute freedom so that everyone remains safe and civilized.
Which, I mean, sounds incredibly logical to our conditioned civilized brains.
On paper, yes.
But then you have Jack. And Jack operates on a terrifyingly simple and seductive premise. Why follow rules when you can make your own?
Yeah, that's the core of his appeal.
And I really want to push back on the assumption that the social contract is what everyone actually wants when the lights go out. I mean, think about a time you are constrained by a frustrating, arbitrary bureaucratic rule at work or in society.
Oh, we've all been there, for sure.
Right. It's like the teacher steps away from the playground.
Yeah.
Isn't there a deeply ingrained, almost intoxicating temptation to just shatter the system entirely, like to invent your own game, even if it's brutal?
Absolutely. Jack taps into that exact thrill of breaking structures you've been forced to live inside.
He really does. He represents the realization that power doesn't require a democratic consensus if there is no authority to enforce the old consensus.
Yeah, power simply belongs to whoever is bold enough or ruthless enough to seize it. And the mechanism of how Jack seizes that power is fascinating to observe from a psychological standpoint.
It's all about immediate gratification.
Right. Totally. He offers the thrill of the hunt, the visceral reward of meat, and most importantly, absolute empowerment.
Right, because for a group of stranded individuals feeling completely powerless against their situation, Jack's philosophy of, hey, we can be kings right now is an incredibly potent alternative.
It's intoxicating compared to Ralph's laborious, long-term vision. Jack recognizes that the fastest way to gain fierce loyalty isn't by appealing to logic.
No, it's by appealing to raw, primal instinct
Yeah.
and immediate desires.
Exactly.
But when you abandon logic for primal instinct, you don't just get a chaotic, fun paradise. You create a massive psychological vacuum.
And nature abhors a vacuum.
It does. The second the structured reality of Ralph's democratic order weakens, that vacuum is flooded with profound paranoia.
Yeah, the reviewers note how fear really creeps in here.
It really does. The group begins hallucinating a physical threat, whispering about a mysterious beast lurking in the jungle.
Which is terrifying for them.
Right, it's like the classic monster under the bed we all feared as kids. But it's fascinating that the moment their social structure weakens, their brains desperately need to invent an external villain so they don't have to look at what they are actually doing to each other.
Right.
But I have to ask, based on the reviews, is the beast actually real in the context of the show? Or is the true monster, like the review's hook line suggests, the kids themselves?
Well, the expert analysis really connects the dots here, pointing out that what's truly fascinating is how fear is utilized.
Okay, how so?
As civilization disappears, the concept of a physical beast becomes a manifestation of the boys' own internal loss of control and descending innocence.
Wow, yeah, so they're projecting.
Exactly. It touches on a core self-defense mechanism of human psychology. As the boys descend into this chaotic freedom, they begin to experience severe cognitive dissonance.
Because they're shedding their empathy, right? They're abandoning their moral compasses and committing increasingly cruel acts.
Precisely. Acknowledging that profound internal darkness, admitting that you are the architect of your own nightmare, is psychologically devastating.
I mean, the human mind simply cannot handle that level of guilt.
It can't. So the mind violently externalizes the terror.
By projecting all that internal guilt and fear onto a phantom monster in the trees. It's a collective hallucination born out of a desperate need for a scapegoat.
And the beast becomes the physical manifestation of their descending morality. Think about it. If there is a literal monster out in the jungle, then the boys aren't the villains of this story.
Right, they're merely victims trying to survive a hostile environment.
Exactly. It completely absolves them of their own savagery. And from a sociological standpoint, the invention of this beast provides Jack with the ultimate political tool to solidify his control.
The weaponization of fear.
Hmm.
It's the oldest authoritarian playbook in human history. You invent, or heavily exaggerate, an existential threat, and then you position yourself as the only one capable of offering protection against it.
Jack fundamentally understands that fear is vastly stronger than reason. I mean, Ralph tries to use logic to prove the beast isn't real, pointing out the lack of physical evidence.
Like a rational approach.
But Jack, conversely, uses the beast to consolidate absolute power. He promises to protect the group, to hunt the beast down, but the price of that protection is total subservience to his brutal militaristic rules.
Wow, so he leverages their manufactured terror to dismantle the last remaining vestiges of the civilized mindset.
He really does, transforming a group of frightened children into a highly cohesive, dangerous in-group united against a perceived out-group threat.
It's incredibly dark. And understanding the heavy psychological weight this story carries, let's pivot to examine exactly how the 2026 series executes this tension, according to the reviews.
Yeah, the critics had a lot to say about the execution.
Bringing this back to the production itself, the creators lean heavily into that psychological dissonance visually. The island is shot as an absolute, breathtaking paradise.
It really is. It's lush, the sunsets are vibrant, the water is crystal clear.
Yet as a viewer, your stomach is constantly tied in knots. There is a relentless, suffocating dread beneath all that gorgeous cinematography.
The environmental aesthetic is intentionally at odds with the narrative reality. Nature isn't punishing these survivors.
No, the island provides abundant fruit, fresh water, and shelter. The environment is entirely benign.
Right, the terror is purely man-made. It emphasizes that the physical threat isn't the jungle at all. The threat is the human element introduced into the jungle.
And that man-made terror is anchored by performances that capture the slow, physical regression of the characters.
The reviews definitely highlight the evolution of Jack in particular as genuinely chilling.
Oh, for sure. The raw physicality of his transformation is mesmerizing. Stripping away the rigid school uniform, the application of war paint to mask his humanity.
And the feral shift in his posture, right? It's also detailed. He goes from a confident leader to a dangerous threat.
But it's not an overnight change, which brings up a fascinating point of contention. Some contemporary viewers have complained that the pacing is, quote, slow at times.
I saw those comments too.
And I really want to push back aggressively on that modern demand for instant action and immediate gratification.
I completely agree with you.
Right. I mean, think about the small, almost imperceptible ethical shortcuts you might take in your own life when no one is looking. A white lie here, taking unearned credit for something there.
Yeah, exactly.
The descent into absolute moral bankruptcy doesn't happen via a massive dramatic leap off a cliff. It's like a roller coaster slowly ticking up the tracks.
That's a great analogy.
Isn't that slow burn absolutely essential for the tension to build until it eventually explodes?
The reviewers who rated the show highly made that exact point, that slow burn is critical regarding the sociology of moral degradation. The breakdown of a society relies on the normalization of deviance.
The normalization of deviance, wow.
Yeah, it's a salami slicing tactic. Taking away ethical norms one incredibly thin slice at a time so nobody truly notices the fundamental shift until the entire system is gone.
Right. Because if the series rushed the pacing and the characters were committing atrocities by episode 2, it would feel entirely unearned.
It would feel artificial and, frankly, kind of cartoonish.
It's the gradual, agonizing erosion of boundaries. First, it's just talking out of turn and interrupting someone holding the conch.
Yeah.
Then it's mocking a vulnerable member's physical appearance.
Then it's a deliberate shove.
Then it's organized bullying. It forces you to witness the micro-compromises that pave the road to hell.
And sitting uncomfortably with those micro-compromises is the entire point of the viewing experience. The deliberate, methodical pacing forces the audience to watch the civilized veneer chip away incrementally.
Right.
It illustrates exactly how an in-group justifies increasingly horrific actions against anyone they deem the out-group. By the time the final explosive acts of physical violence occur, they don't feel like a shock value addition.
No, they feel like the tragic, unavoidable conclusion of 1,000 tiny, ignored moral failures.
Which is why the reviewer says that slow burn makes the ending hit even harder.
And that unavoidable climax brings us to the core philosophical gauntlet this series throws down. When the final remnants of order shatter, the resulting descent into savagery as described in the source is absolute.
It's total collapse.
Friendships don't just strain, they are violently severed. The line between right and wrong doesn't just blur, it evaporates completely. And it leaves the audience confronting a deeply uncomfortable question about our own nature.
The big question.
Right. Are humans fundamentally cooperative, empathetic, and naturally good? Or are we naturally selfish, tribal, and brutal?
The enduring resonance of this narrative and why this particular 2026 adaptation succeeds so brilliantly and earns that 8 out of 10 rating from the reviewer is that it forcefully strips away our comfortable societal illusions.
We vastly prefer to view violence, cruelty, and authoritarianism as external viruses, don't we?
We do. We see them as aberrations that infect an otherwise healthy society. But the thesis presented here is that the savagery wasn't an external infection.
It wasn't an outside force attacking the boys.
No, it was inherent. It was something that was inside them all along, just waiting for the right conditions to emerge.
To visualize this, let's discard the old, tired cliché of civilization being just a thin coat of paint.
Okay, what's a better way to look at it?
Think of civilization instead as an incredibly complex, heavy scaffolding holding up a very delicate building. That scaffolding is our legal system, our social shame, our community expectations, and our fear of incarceration. If you pull away those structural supports, like stranding a group on a deserted island with no consequences, the building doesn't just look a little different. The immense internalized pressure of human self-interest causes the entire structure to violently collapse inward on itself.
That structural collapse implies a really sobering reality. Peaceful coexistence is not our default state of being.
Wow. Yeah.
Goodness, empathy, and maintaining a democratic order are active, daily choices. They require tremendous cognitive effort, constant vigilance, and robust structural reinforcement to maintain.
So the moment that external scaffolding is removed,
the default state we revert to is a brutal reality where life is nasty, brutish, and short, and the strong inevitably devour the weak.
that is the ultimate reality check, and really the perfect place to synthesize today's deep dive. We started with the fantasy of surviving a plane crash and waking up to the ultimate freedom of a pristine, rule-free island paradise.
Sounds great until you actually think about it.
Right. Because as the extensive analysis of this 2026 adaptation lays out so methodically, that fantasy is a psychological trap. This isn't a story about conquering nature or learning to start a fire.
Not at all.
It's a chilling mirror held up to the human condition, exposing the terrifying reality of what happens when the fragile scaffolding of society is systematically dismantled.
It forces a profound, necessary reevaluation of the foundational myths we tell ourselves about human decency and the durability of the social contract we all rely on every single day.
The obvious question you're left with by the review is, if you were stranded on that island, stripped of all consequences, would you have the immense fortitude to maintain the rules, or would you succumb to the primal draw of becoming the monster?
It's a tough question to answer, honestly.
It really is. But consider this final twist to mull over as we wrap up today. We spend so much time fearing the breakdown of order and the chaos that follows. But what if the people who believe they are the most righteous, strict enforcers of the rules are actually just using the concept of order as an excuse to exert their own dominance?
Oh, whoa.
Right. At what point does the rigid, uncompromising enforcement of civilization become its own form of absolute brutality? Something for you to ponder the next time you find yourself entirely convinced that you are firmly on the right side of the line.